So hello everyone. Welcome to this 21st webinar on a treatise on cosmic fire. You probably have a few more people joining us as we begin. As you know, this webinar series is available on makara.us under the subheadings Moria Federation webinars. Then webinar series in progress as shown here. Dwayne Carpenter's going to start or resume his Awakening the Higher Mind series in July. Date is yet to be announced, so keep an eye on that. That should be very interesting. All episodes of this webinar series, the Secret Teachings of All Ages, and the Secret Doctrine series are also available on YouTube. Just do a search for Francis Donald and the webinar you wish to view. You may join any of these webinars on the home page of moriafederation.com, up in the upper left-hand corner of the home page. Okay, last time we finished the final section of Division C, which we've been working on since the beginning, since I picked this up back in August, called the etheric body and prana, where we learned about the stages of pralaya for a solar logos, when, quote, the subjective life, the synthesis of will and love taking form, is withdrawn. And as a result, quote, the matter of the solar system will be colored by active intelligence and by active love. So this newly love-conditioned matter will form the material basis for the next solar system. DK then applies this concept of material development to a human being using the as above, so below principle, noting that through the process of evolution, a human being gradually takes, quote, a more evolved physical body of greater responsiveness, tuned to a higher key, of more adequate refinement, and vibrating to a different measure. And we took a look at each of these conditions. We then looked at the idea of the out-breath and the in-breath, of manifestation and withdrawal from manifestation. DK says, on the path of in-breathing, whether human, planetary, or logoic, they are no longer attracted and the form begins to dissipate. So the indweller is no longer attracted to outer manifestation. As a result, the form begins to dissipate. They withdraw their interest, and the forces, likewise entities, who are the agents of distraction, carry on their necessary work of breaking up the form. They scatter it, as it is occultly called, to, quote unquote, the four winds of heaven, or to the regions of the four breaths, a fourfold separation and distribution. DK then tells us that the aim of each life, whether human, planetary, or solar, should be the effecting and the carrying out of a definite purpose. This purpose is the development of a more adequate form for the use of the spirit. So the goal, which won't be achieved until the Earth becomes a sacred planet, is for all humanity to unconditionally demonstrate purposeful living. At the very end of the webinar, we began a new division called Kundalini and the Spine by reading the footnote referenced in the title here. And this takes us up to where we left off. So let's start this session by rereading the footnote, and then we'll talk about it. So could we get a reader, please?
Yeah, Heike, you want to read? Yes. Kundalini, the serpent power or mystic fire. It is called the serpentine or annular power on account of its spiral-like working or progress in the body of the ascetic, developing the power in himself. It is an electric, fiery, occult, or phoretic power. The great pristine force which underlies all organic and inorganic matter. H.P. Blavatsky. 61. Kundalini is the static form of the creative energy and bodies which are the source of all energies, including prana. This word comes from the adjective kundalini, or coiled. She's spoken of as coiled because she's sleeping, lies coiled, and because the nature of her power is spiraline or spiraline. In other words, this Kundalini Shakti is that which, when it moves to manifest itself, appears as the universe. To say that it is coiled is to say that it is at rest. That is, in form or static potential energy, Kundalini Shakti is in individual bodies, is power at rest, or the static center around which every form of existence as moving power revolves. That's The Serpent Power by Arthur Avalon.
Thank you. Okay, first up, Blavatsky's quote, Kundalini, the serpent power or mystic fire. It is called a serpentine or annular power on account of its spiral-like working or progress in the body of the ascetic, developing the power in himself. It is an electric, fiery, occult, or phohatic power. The great pristine force which underlies all organic and inorganic matter. So annular just means circular. When she calls it serpentine or annular power, it's identified with both the spiral and with the circle. Whereas HPB considers Kundalini fire phohatic, A.E. Powell, in his book The Mental Body, describes Phohat and Kundalini as two different forms of energy, listing these two plus prana as the sum total of all existing energy. An ascetic is one who is dedicated to pure living and has given up all personality desire, both necessary conditions for correct development of the Kundalini. So some of these ascetics may have this in mind, maybe on a specific path to arouse a Kundalini. Others are just doing their practice, and that is a byproduct of their practice, the rising of the Kundalini. In fact, all of us have some Kundalini activity going on. We find out later in this section that that just even advanced human from the Aryan race have already some Kundalini activity. Okay, next we get 3 quotes from Arthur Avalon's The Serpent Power. First, Kundalini is the static form of the creative energy in bodies, which are the source of all energies, including prana. We have a greater insight from DK, who says just a few pages back, the fire of Kundalini produces the heat of the center and its intense radiance and brilliance, while the pranic emanatory fire produces ever-increasing activity and rotation. So heat and radiance is a result of that latent fire. Prana has in its nature this quality of activity and rotation. It's a useful distinction to remember when considering the different natures of these two fundamental fires. Next, this word came from the adjective Kundalini, or coiled. She is spoken of as coiled because she is sleeping, lies coiled, and because the nature of her power is spiraling. Referencing this comment, MDR brings in astrology related to the Kundalini. Could we get a reader, please?
Yeah, Janet, do you want to read?
Sure. The reference refers to she because we are dealing with Kali, with the dark feminine, plutonic power on the first ray. Kali is the destructive force of the mother, the fury of the mother. Kundalini is dragon power. Shakti, which means force or potency, is feminine and indicates the power which accompanies her polar opposite on any number of levels. Each male principle has its accompanying Shakti or power. There's something about the way the constellation of the dragon, Draco, coils around our present pole star, Polus, which reminds one of the coiled Kundalini. Interestingly, Draco is said to be the base of the spine center of one about whom naught may be said. We seem to be dealing with Kundalini latent, ruled by Mars. Once Mercury enters the process, we have Kundalini active, which ascends in spirals as a Mercurian symbol of Academy demonstrates. Shall we connect spiral movement with the planet Mercury? Mercurial rulership of the Antakarana, which also ascends in spirals, according to certain diagrams, suggests that the spiral may be considered one of the Mercurial movements. Interestingly, Mercury begins as a third-ray planet, probably on the personality level, and then moves in the soul nature onto the fourth ray, associated with Buddha, and the second aspect. In this change of rays, we would have the change from rotary to spiral motion.
So we get this, unique insight that comes through Michael's incredible immersion in astrology. Some really interesting points here. The idea that the entire constellation Draco acts as the base of the spine chakra for the one about whom none may be said, suggesting that before that phase of manifestation, which involves, the OAW, and MBS, it's easier just to say the words. Before that manifestation, that Draco holds that Kundalini force, which is then drawn forth by the one about whom not may be said. Amazing idea. Then we have interesting teachings about Mercury, the idea that it could be, in this solar system at least, the source of spiral movement, which makes it very important in this life of this solar system, since that is the primary form of movement. And then we have this idea of it moving from the third to the fourth ray, a really important idea, the exoteric rulerships of Mercury in Virgo and Gemini are also expressive of this third ray energy because you have this exoteric rulership involved, hence the development of mind aspect. So anytime you have any thoughts or questions, raise your hand and we'll take it up. Okay. And then finally, in other words, this Kundalini Shakti is that which, when it moves to manifest itself, appears as the universe. To say that it is coiled is to say that it is at rest, that is, in the form of static potential energy. Kundalini Shakti in individual bodies is power at rest, or the static center round which every form of existence as moving power revolves. So, Kundalini also demonstrates on cosmic levels, as we just learned from Michael, where it holds the potential energy for all manifestation. A passage from later in a treatise on cosmic fire further reveals this universal aspect of Kundalini. Could we get a reader, please?
Yeah, Kira.
The second great life impulse, or life wave, initiated by our planetary logos, when brought in conjunction with the first, hang on a second, was the basis of that activity which we call evolutionary energy. It resulted in a gradual unrolling or revelation of the divine form. The heavenly serpent manifested, being produced out of the egg, and began its convolutions, gaining in strength and majesty, and producing through it its immense fecundity, millions of lesser serpents. The reptile kingdom is the most important of the animal kingdom in certain aspects, if such an apparently contradictory statement can be made. For all animal life can be seen passing through it during the prenatal stage or returning to it when the form is in advanced decomposition. The connection is not purely a physical one, but is also psychic. When the real nature and method of the Kundalini, or serpent fire, is known, this relation will be better understood and the history of the second round assume a new importance.
Thank you. Can we get another reader, please?
The secret life lies hidden in the serpent stage, not the life of the spirit, but the life of the soul. And this will be revealed as the serpent of the astral light is truly appreciated and duly studied. One of the four Lepika lords who stands nearest to our planetary logos is called the living serpent, and his emblem is a serpent of blue with eye in the form of a ruby in its head. Students who care to carry the symbolic a little further can connect this idea with the eye of Shiva, which sees and knows all and records all, as does the human eye in lesser degree. All is photographed upon the astral light as the human eye receives impressions upon the retina. The same thought is frequently conveyed in the Christian Bible, in the Hebrew and Christian recognition of the all-seeing eye of God. The application and value of the hints here given may be apparent if the subject of the third eye is studied and its relation to the spine and the spinal currents investigated.
Thank you, Andrew, and welcome. Good to have
Thank
you
you.
with us. Okay, and one last reading. This is one long quote from Leighton TCF. Reader, please.
Kirsten.
This third eye is one of the objects of Kundalinic vivification, and in the spinal territory, there is first the center at the base of the spine, the home of the sleeping fire. Next, we have the triple channel along with that fire. Next, we have the triple channel along which that fire will travel in due course of evolution. And finally, we find at the summit of the column and surmounting all that small organ called the pineal gland, which when vivified causes the third eye to open, and the beauties of the higher, subtler planes to stand revealed. All this physical occurrence is possible to man owing to certain events which happened to the seven heavenly serpents in the second or serpent round. These happenings necessitated the formation and evolution of that peculiar and mysterious family we call the reptilian. These forms of divine life are very intimately connected with the second planetary scheme, being responsive to energy emanating from that scheme and reaching the Earth via the second globe in the second chain. A group of special devas connected with a particular open sound in the planetary work with the reptile evolution.
Thank you. So we have the source of this energy in the solar system would appear to be Venus, and that it comes to us via the Venus chain, very specifically from the second globe of that chain. Not surprising, being that Venus acts as the soul to our planet, and thus the Kundalini is the means by which we're able to achieve consciousness of that. I saw a hand go up.
Yeah, Robert. Here in the middle column, the last line, where it says the pineal gland, which when vivified causes the third eye to open. That seems interesting that a physical event would have a reaction on the etheric. The third eye is an etheric center. What do you think?
Let's see, I'm finding here. Finally, we find at the summit of the column here.
Yeah, yeah.
And surmounting all, that small organ called the pineal gland, which when vivified causes the third eye to open. Yeah, you wonder what is truly causal here. Well, it's what vivifies the pineal gland, which is causal, right? And that's going to be soul contact, soul infusion that allows that to happen. You know, then it's the first effect is the vivification of the pineal gland, which then allows that center, which is the Ajna center, to open. Right. So, but I agree with you. You would think it'd be the other way around, that the more causal would be the more etheric, which would be the ajna, which is more etheric, obviously, than the actual gland. But this suggests otherwise, that through stimulation of the gland, the third eye is vivified. So
yeah, so that's interesting. I mean, it is unexpected. So anyway,
yeah,
thanks.
Good point. Anyone else? Anytime you have any comments or questions, just raise your hand. Okay, let's read the introduction to this short division. I think it might be one of the shortest in the book, entitled Kundalini and the Spine, which is made up of the first section, Kundalini and the three triangles, those triangles being in the head, in the body, and at the base of the spine. You know, we have spent some time learning about these triangles. And then the second section, the arousing of Kundalini. Don't get too excited. He doesn't tell you at all about how to arouse it. Mostly he tells you not to. But anyway, could we get a reader for this intro?
Yeah, Magda, do you want to read? Are you there, Magda? I see the volume now, but I still can't hear you.
Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Very briefly, owing to the impossibility of revealing much on this necessarily dangerous subject, we will consider the subject of Kundalini and the spine. We must remember here that we are dealing with etheric counterpart of the spine and not with the bony structure, which we call the spine or spinal column. This is a fact not sufficiently recognized by those who treat of the matter. Too much emphasis has been laid on the 3 spinal channels that compose the threefold spinal cord. These channels are important in connection with the nervous system of the man, but in relation to the matter in hand, they are not primarily so important as the etheric channel, which is the unit enclosing these 3.
Thank you. So here are 2 illustrations of the nervous system, which DK tells us is more directly connected with the 3 Kundalini channels than those channels are to the, quote, unit enclosing these 3, which he calls simply the etheric channel. This was news to me. Let's continue. Can we get a reader? This is a listing.
Yeah, Marianne, do you want to read?
Therefore, we must strictly remember that we are dealing with A, the etheric channel, B, the fire that passes up the channel, C, the conjunction of this fire with the radiatory energizing fire of the physical body at the point between the shoulder blades, D, their united ascension into the head, E, their blending eventually with the monastic fire which energizes the 3 head centers.
Thank you. So first, when described in the singular, etheric channel invariably refers to the passage taken by the Kundalini up the spine. But when used in the plural, especially in esoteric healing, etheric channels, plural, refers to the, quote, nadis, that system of slightly denser etheric channels or tiny threads of force which underlie the entire nervous system. Slightly denser, that is, than the major and minor chakras. Next, B, the fire that passes up the channel, which DK deals with at length in the previous section we've been studying for the last months, which consists of the 2 fires of matter, which are the Kundalini and or latent fires and the pranic fires. And C, the conjunction of this fire with the radiatory energizing fire of the physical body at the point between the shoulder blades. The Kundalini and pranic fires merge in this center between the lower shoulder blades, which DK tells us is not a sacred center and is only temporarily created for the purpose of blending these 2 fires, i.e., note that here he describes it as a point and not a center. D, their united ascension into the head. After the union of the Kundalini and the pranic fires, they are drawn upward by the 3rd or manasic fire. So a question, when blending, do these fires lose their separate qualities, or do they work as one, which MDR calls patterning through resonance? It's an open question. Finally, E, they're blending eventually with the monastic fire, which energizes the 3 head centers. We read about this blending a couple of sessions ago. Could we get a reader, please, just for review?
Yeah, Miri.
Yes. The 3 centers react faintly to each other's vibratory movement, feeling the warmth and rhythm of each other, yet separated. Then the fire leaps from center to center, and each whirling wheel becomes linked by a chain of fire till there is a triangle of fire through which the Kundalini and pranic fires radiate back and forth.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next up, the first section of this division entitled Kundalini and the Three Triangles. Can we get a reader, please?
Yeah, Nisa.
The fire energizing the triangle in the head is the higher correspondence to the triangle of prana, midway in the body, and its lower reflection at the base of the spine. We have, therefore, in the human unit, three important triangles. One, in the head, the triangle of the three major centers. A, the pineal gland, B, the pituitary body, C, the alta major center. Two, in the body, the triangle of prana. A, between the shoulders, B, above the diaphragm, C, the spleen. Three, at the base of the spine, the three lower centers. A point at the bottom of the spinal column. B and C, the two major sex organs in the male and female.
Thank you. So, three triangles is an archetypal grouping. For example, in the constitution of a human being, we have three major triangles: the personality, mind, emotions, and body; the essential soul, which is really the spiritual triad, Atma, Buddhi, Manas; and the monadic triangle, will, wisdom, and activity. Could the three triangles of latent, radiatory, and monastic fire be the lower correspondence of these higher triangles? Here's a chart illustrating the location of the glands that make up the triangles in the head, and an illustration of the chakra at the base of the spine that carries the three aspects of the Kundalini fire, here represented by the elephant and the two human figures here. Can we get a reader for the footnote referenced by, quote, B and C, the two major sex organs in the male and female? Can we get a reader? Yeah, there it is.
Andrew, you want to read again?
It is not my intention to lay any stress on the sex side of this subject, for these are organs with which the occultist has nothing to do. I will not, therefore, enumerate them in detail. I would only point out that in the transference of the fire at the base of the spine and the turning of its attention to the two higher triangles comes the redemption of man.
Thank you, Andrew. So here's a chart created by MDR that lists the three triangles we've been discussing, as well as their relation to the three rays. So you have, rays 1, 2, and 3, triangles in the head, crown center, ajna center, alta major. You can see the ray relations here. And then the pranic triangle, the shoulder blade center, that's that synthesizing center. And then the center above the diaphragm, and the splenic center. And then the basic triangle, ray 1, at the very bottom of the spine. It's kind of reversed here. And then the female sex organs for ray 2, and the male sex organs for ray 3. This also gives you another triplicity, one for each ray, right? Okay. Next up, can we get a reader, please? I think, Andrew, you may still be unmuted.
Heike.
The merging of the fires of matter and the fires of mind results in the energizing of the sum total of the atoms of the matter of the body. This is the secret of the immense staying power of the great thinkers and workers of the race. It results also in a tremendous stimulation of the three higher centers in the body, the head, the heart, and the throat, and in the electrification of this area of the body. These higher centers then form a field of attraction for the downflow of the third fire, that of spirit.
Okay, it's an important paragraph. First, the merging of the fires of matter and the fires of mind results in the energizing of the sum total of the atoms of the matter of the body. This is the secret of the immense staying power of the great thinkers and workers of the race. The fires of matter and of mind are made up of three triangles, which we learned earlier, begin to be activated as early as the first initiation, stimulated even before that, but actually activated even as early as the first initiation. They increase their activity sequentially up through the third initiation, and then finally burn through the protective web at the top of the head at the fourth. The quote, energizing of the sum total of the atoms of matter of the body suggests a progressive increase in physical vitality, astral sensitivity, and mental clarity, demonstrating as staying power. It's interesting to me that that this merging of the fires of matter and of mind can actually affect and energize the actual atoms of matter of the body. Of course, you never know what he means by matter. I'm thinking he means all the etheric atoms, which then in turn energize the physical through the spleen. Okay. The quote, energizing of the, yeah, there we go. Okay, next up. It results also in a tremendous stimulation of the three higher centers of the body, the head, the heart, the throat, in the electrification of this area of the body. Here DK switches from glands to centers. We learn on page 169 that there is a correspondence, A, between the alta major center and the throat center. These are important to keep in mind. Between the heart center and the pituitary body, and between the head center and the pineal gland. The term electrification suggests the introduction of electric or monadic fire, which becomes progressively stronger between the first and third initiations. Certainly this fire is akin to the fire that comes through the rod of initiation. Finally, these higher centers then form a field of attraction for the downflow of the third fire, that of spirit. You know, whenever DK talks about spirit, he's talking about the monad, right, via the soul, but nonetheless, it's the fire of the monad. DK calls this third fire, calls this the third fire instead of the fourth, because latent and radiatory fires have blended into one fire of matter. Thus, this blended fire of matter in conjunction with the fire of mind together demonstrate through three four-dimensionally rotating triangles. At this point, all the triangles become four-dimensional, which means that they're turning like a wheel upon itself, right? They draw down the fire of spirit from the causal body, which you may remember from earlier, shine forth from the top of the head of the initiate. I see a question.
Yeah. Can we go back to the last page, the bottom of 135 for a moment? The TCF. Yeah, okay. No, yeah.
Where is it?
Right there. Okay. Go back one.
Is this the one?
No, it's the one just before the.
Just before
Yes,
this?
yeah. Where it says it's talking about the triangle at the base of the spine. It's the bottom of the page.
Oh, the one with the.
Yes.
This one. Yeah. Okay.
No, it has no pictures. It's just TCF text.
I have no idea. Let's see if we can find it.
Page 135 at the bottom.
It doesn't. That's 135, bottom of the page. Oh, wait a minute.
Okay, you see at the base of the spine. You see the very bottom of the page, just before the.
Oh, okay. We're not. Yeah, hang on. We'll get.
Yeah,
there.
that's it. You're
There
right.
it is.
There. Okay, great.
Right.
This is what's confusing to me. Okay, here he's talking about the triangles that each individual has, right? In the head, in the body, at the base of the spine. But the way B and C are described, like every individual doesn't have male and sex organs and female. So it seems like the implication here is the triangle is composed of the point at the bottom of the spine and then the two major sex organs in the male and female. Because otherwise you have, it doesn't, like that little chart you showed for Michael, every person doesn't have male and female sex organs unless I'm missing.
I think actually they do. I think what happens is one demonstrates and one is latent. I think that triangular circulation of these 3 points is consistent in all manifestation. You don't have a complete absence of the opposite gender. It just is not demonstrating physically. That's what I'm thinking.
Well, I've been missing something all these years.
Yeah, well, you might want to do some deep, inner work on that one.
Or outer work, but I'll need the help of somebody else.
Well, at the 6th initiation, you become hermaphroditic. So if you can, just hold on.
Yeah.
So I think this triplicity, you're not going to defeat this fundamental triangle of latent matter. What you can do is look at this more in the abstract, that it's the yin yang of the latent energy, which in order to demonstrate has to have that polarity, right? How this then, we just don't have the information on why the X or the Y chromosome dominates and what the effect of that is on the Muladhara, which is this lowest chakra. But I see other hands. Maybe we get some info from some other folks. Yes, Mikhail, could you?
Yeah, Nasa.
Yeah, just speaking on the physical level, as an obstetric nurse for many years, when the cells, and I'm not sure at what point it is when the fetus is, but at some point for a male child, the clump of cells is bathed in, I would guess hormones. I'm not up on that moment in time, and then it differentiates as a male child. And I would have to think then that originally at a higher level, there has to be the potential for either, or that it is hermaphrodite, and I don't know, but that's
right.
That's all I got.
Well, that's really interesting, and it tends to support this idea that the triangle stays intact. It could have to do with the direction of circulation, though we're also told that that is determined by the ray type. But, you know, if it, for instance, circulated from this causal base to the male, then to the female, back to the base, that might be indicative of a male child, and vice versa with a female. Just don't know, but it's interesting. Yes, Robert.
It's something that kind of goes against the thrust, so to speak, of what we're talking about, is the word major here. The two major sex organs. If we're saying that there are two major sex organs in the male, and there are two major sex organs in the female, that's different than kind of the predominant sex organ and some sort of, you know, subcluster or some latent kind of energy.
I'm always fascinated by how you can read things into. I just read this just simply two major sex organs, which are male and female. I don't read two major. I mean, I could see how you could read that, but that I just don't think that's what's meant. Yeah, I don't think there's two major sex organs in both the male and in the female.
When in that case, you're missing your triangle. The triangle is the point at the base, and the two, you know, a triangle is 3 points.
And well, yeah, but this is what we've been discussing, the idea of a latent, either feminine or masculine, when it's the outer demonstration is through the opposite sex. Yeah, and that the energy of circulation is still there, you know, because, you know, you could looking at it another way. We've all been both sexes many times, and that is inherent in our basic equipment, right? In this root chakra. But, you know, it'd be interesting to pick somebody's like a Hindu expert on the chakras, because
Forgive me.
Yeah.
I forgive me. Can I don't know how to put the hand up, but I wanted to comment on this symbol of Muladhara.
Uh-huh.
The elephant in the bottom is Ganesh. This is from the Hindu religion, and he is the guardian. He is the one who guards the gate to the mother, to go back to Kundalini. And the two women at the top, they are presenting Ida and Pingala, or yin and yang, female, male. So I wanted to tell you about this.
Yeah,
maybe
that's right. It's absolutely right. The Ida and the Pingala do start here. You know, this is where they come together. You know, this is this bottom point. You called it the guardian. Do you know? Is there a name for this?
Yeah, his name is Ganesh. Ganesh.
Ganesh.
Ganesh with G-A-N.
Ganesh. Ganesh. Okay. So it's also a unifying point. Remember, Michael puts the first ray as represented by this Tanish. So that's this. That really is the lower point, right? And then the demonstration of duality comes through the Ida, which is the feminine, and the Pingala, which is the masculine. Streams that move up from there. So thank you for that. That's
that explains the whole problem. You know,
yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. It really does. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you know, and these, I think we get into this a little later, but these are associated, the Ida is associated with the moon, with feminine, coolness, and lower mind, and the Pingala with the solar aspect, with higher mind, with heat, with the sun. So there's your true, the true duality. But, you know, we can't ignore that at this level, they represent the energy of the two sex organs. Anyone else? They're still opening for altogether different theories if you've got one. But I think you hit on that. I didn't catch your name when you started speaking, but I think when you differentiated the Pingala and the Ida, that really is what we're looking at here. Okay.
That was Frida. And
Frida, thank you, Frida.
And it's Ganesh with a G.
Oh, Ganesh, not my audio isn't the greatest in the world, so of course it's Ganesh. I'm looking at, yes, of course, that's the elephant figure. That would be interesting too. And elephants, I wonder if, I always think of elephants as second ray, but not to get too far afield here.
Yeah,
okay.
that Miri has a question. She had the question, especially because MDR associated the male to ray 3 and female to ray 2.
Yeah. Therefore,
men wouldn't be able to channel ray 2 and women wouldn't be able to channel ray 3.
No, not at all. The odd number rays are called masculine because fundamentally they're ultimately resolved into the first ray, which is the spirit aspect. In Theosophy, the spirit aspect is associated with the odd numbered rays, right? And with the father, with the male. And the feminine is related to the form and to the even numbered rays. But of course, that form can be of a very, very high order. Like, for instance, the entire Kundalini is considered feminine. It's, it's as Michael said, it's the Kali aspect because it's the destroyer. So yeah, therefore, that doesn't mean that literally a person, an entified male or female, speaking in terms of gender, can have any combination of the rays at all, right? So yeah.
And I wanted to add something,
Sure.
that given that we're pretty much dealing with this in a way topic in society right now, I kind of think like we need to stay away from the material aspect of the sexes. Like there's it's kind of like an etheric sex, in that sense. There's this in my mind, but there's this, there's the last Gene Roddenberry TV series that he created was Earth Final Conflict, and there's this contrast between humans and Talons are this advanced, I guess you could say, almost divine hermaphrodite. They don't have, but they reproduce themselves. So they live like 10,000 years, and then at that point they go through this process of mitosis where they reproduce another Talon, and it inherits all of the consciousness and all of the knowledge. So it's not, I think when we reach that state where we're actually divine hermaphrodite, it's no longer sexual orientation in the way that it's being kind of explored right now.
Well, actually, even way before that, because when you lift the sacral center, the energy, creative energy from the sacral center to the throat, you're already sublimating the sexual energy, right? And we do that in preparation for the first initiation. That's the first great transfer. In fact, I would say probably everybody here has either made that transfer or is in process of making that transfer. It doesn't mean that the sacral center drops off into quiescence. It can still be used and active, but the focus of the creative energy that flows through that center in order to create the outer creation of progeneration is lifted to the throat, which is the seat of the mind, really. And the creativity shifts from the physical to the mental. So, okay, good discussion. I'm going to come out of this and get back to where we were. See here. Here we go. Okay, can we get a reader, please?
Yeah, Janet.
The many-petaled head center at the top of the head becomes exceedingly active. It is a synthetic head center and the sum total of all the other centers. The stimulation of the centers throughout the body is paralleled or duplicated by the concurrent vivification of the many-petaled lotus. It is the meeting place of the three fires, those of the body, of the mind, and of the spirit. The one element with the ego is completed when it is fully stimulated, and combustion then ensues. This is duplicated in the subtler vehicles and causes final consummation of the liberation of spirit.
Thank you. Okay, so first, the many-petaled head center at the top of the head becomes exceedingly active. It is the synthetic head center and the sum total of all the other centers. Let's see. So this follows on, let me find what this follows on. Yeah. These higher centers then form a field of attraction for the downflow of the third fire, that of spirit. So it's important to have this in context. So the higher centers, which are in the head, form a field of attraction for the downflow of the third fire, that of spirit. And then we have the idea that the many-petaled head center at the top of the head becomes exceedingly active. Okay. Let's see here now. So DK gives us a graphic description of this stage a bit later in TCF. Can we get a reader, please? He's talking about this specific phase of the downrush of the spirit fire and the extreme stimulation of the head center in the petals therein. Can we get a reader?
Yeah, Kira.
At the culmination of life experience, and when man has reached his goal, each triangle is a radiant path of fire, and each center a wheel of living fiery force rotating at terrific speed. The center at this stage not only rotates in a specific direction, but literally turns upon itself, forming a living, flaming, iridescent globe of pure fire, and holding within it a certain geometrical shape, yet withal vibrating so rapidly that the eye can scarcely follow it. Above all, at the top of the head, will be seen a fiery display that seems to put all the other centers into insignificance. From the heart of this many-petaled lotus issues a flame of fire with the basic hue of a man's ray. This flame mounts upward and seems to attract downward a sheet of electric light, which is the downflow from the spirit on the highest plane. This marks the blending of the fires and the deliverance of man from the trammels of matter.
Thank you. Any thoughts about this? Beautiful vision of what happens. Okay. Next, the stimulation of the centers throughout the body is paralleled or duplicated by the concurrent vivification of the many-petaled lotus. In the same way that the lower 6 subplanes of any subplane are demonstrations of the first or atomic subplane, so the 6 centers in the body are demonstrations of the synthetic center at the top of the head. DK is here giving us the occult process concerning the science of liberation from matter. Next, it is the meeting place of the 3 fires, those of the body, of the mind, and of the spirit. So the crown chakra is not just the fire of spirit, as is often thought, but rather the synthetic meeting place of all 3 fires. Let's do a quick review of the stages that lead up to this culminating event. I know, these webinars spread out over months, and it's difficult to hold it all. So through the natural processes of evolution and later through meditation and service, the latent fire in matter rises and begins to work with the pranic fires to stimulate the chakras, eventually merging in a center between the shoulder blades. Meanwhile, the 3 fires of mind begin to glow, connect, then circulate, eventually merging with the now unified pranic and basal fires. When the latent, pranic, and mental fires meet, they draw down from the causal body the threefold fire of spirit into the crown chakra. This vivifies all the chakras, as well as the etheric and physical substance of the body. So that's where we stand. Next, the at-one-ment with the ego is completed when it is fully stimulated, and combustion then ensues. This is duplicated in the subtler vehicles and causes the final consummation and the liberation of spirit. So complete soul infusion happens when the crown chakra is fully stimulated. Once this is achieved, the purpose of the lower vehicles is complete, and liberation of the soul imprisoned in form, that part of the soul that's imprisoned in form, commences. This takes place between the 3rd and 4th initiations and is beautifully described by the first stanza of Zahn in A Treatise on Cosmic Fire. Can we get a reader, please?
Yeah, Christian.
The secret of the fire lieth hid in the 2nd letter of the sacred word. The mystery of life is concealed within the heart. When the lower point vibrates, when the sacred triangle glows, when the point, the middle, center, and the apex connect and circulate the fire, when the threefold apex likewise burns, then the 2 triangles, the great and the lesser, merge into one flame, which burneth up the whole.
Thank you. Okay, next up, can we get a reader, please?
Magda, you want to read?
Yes. The merging of the fires of matter is the result of evolutionary growth when left to the normal, slow development that time alone can bring. The junction of the 2 fires of matter is effected early in the history of man and is the cause of the rude health that the clean living, high-thinking man should normally enjoy. When the fires of matter have passed, united, still farther along the etheric spinal channel, they contact the fire of manas as it radiates from the throat center. Clarity of thought is here essential, and it will be necessary to elucidate somewhat this rather abstruse subject.
Thank you. So this first sentence reminds us that Not all of the Kundalini stimulation is part of the forced process brought on through initiation. Much is done over the eons of incarnational living to prepare the acolyte for this merging of the fires of matter. Next, a sentence about the natural evolutionary effects of good, clean living, which is just inherently purificatory, right? Early in the history of man refers to, where he says here, early in the history of man, that refers to the Lemurian period. And next, when the fires of matter have passed, united still further along the etheric spinal channel, they contact the fire of manas as it radiates from the throat center. Clarity of thought is here essential and will be necessary to elucidate somewhat this abstruse subject. We've read about the blending of the fires of matter and of mind, but this is the first time that DK names the throat center as the radiating source of the fires of manas. Let's continue. Can we get a reader, please?
Add again.
One, the three major head centers from the physical standpoint are the A, outer center, B, pineal gland, C, pituitary body. 2, they form a monastic triangle after the juncture with the two fires of the two lower triangles, i.e., when they become synthetic. 3, but the purely monastic triangle prior to this merging is A, the throat center, B, the pineal gland, and C, the pituitary body. This is during the period when the human unit consciously aspires and throws his will on the side of evolution, thus making his life constructive.
Thank you. So this list distinguishes two stages of the monastic triangle. First, we have a list of the three physical head centers, which only forms a monastic triangle when they have blended with the Kundalini and pranic triangles, up through the first three initiations. Then we're given a second list of three centers, which we're told become active during the stages of aspiration and consequent constructive living. These three become active before the first three, right? Which is interesting. The only difference, it would seem that the transition between these two stages happens when, quote, the fires of matter have passed united still further along the etheric spinal channel and contact the fire of manas as it radiates from the throat center. You probably notice that the only difference between these two lists is that the throat center in the second list is replaced by the alta major. Any thoughts or questions? What happens here, let's see. It shifts entirely into the actual head is one of the things that happens, right? The throat center is in the throat, after all. It's above the shoulder blades, but with these three centers, we have the alta center is by elevation higher than the throat center. We're given hints as to why this substitution occurs in the next paragraph. Can we get a reader?
The other fire of matter, sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. The other fire of matter, the dual fire, is attracted upward and merges with the fire of mind through a junction effected at the alta major center. This center is situated at the base of the skull, and there is a slight gap between this center and the point at which the fires of matter issue from the spinal channel. Part of the work of the man who is developing thought power has to do is to build a temporary channel in etheric matter to bridge the gap. This channel is the reflection in physical matter of the antaskarana that the ego has to build in order to bridge the gap between the lower and higher mental, between the causal vehicle on the third subplane of the mental plane and the monastic permanent atom of the first subplane. This is the work that all advanced thinkers are unconsciously doing now.
Thank you, Andrew. So first, the other fire of matter, the dual fire, is attracted upward and merges with the fire of mind through a junction affected at the alta major center. I'm always so impressed by the way DK unfolds information. You know, we have the first part of this sentence. We've been told this many, many times now, so it should be familiar, right? It's the dual fire being, of course, the latent and the pranic fires is attracted upwards, merges with the fire of mind. Now we're given this new piece of information that this merging is affected at the alta major center. Remember, this is the second juncture where two fires merge. The first is a point between the shoulder blades where the latent and radiatory fires join, right? And then we have this second one at the alta major center. So, you know, going back, you have this demonstration in the throat center of mental energy, of the fires of mind, but it's not until it demonstrates through the alta major center, or alta center, he calls it here, that you have this place of synthesis of all three fires. So next, the center is situated at the base of the skull, and there's a slight gap between this center and the point at which the fires of matter issue from the spinal channel. Here's a medical chart of the upper spine in which I've superimposed here a possible location for this center, but you know, it could be anywhere in this area. Here's the top of the spine. So, you know, there's a gap here that between this center and the point at which the fires of matter issue, right? So you have to bridge this gap. Interesting, it's like the antakarana, and you know, you have to wonder how they're connected. You know, the bridging of the antakarana from the mental unit, because we're also talking there about mental energy, right? You start with the mental unit, you bridge to the monastic permanent atom. Well, how is that related, you know, to this bridging, you know, from the fires issuing from the top of the spine to this alta major center? It's kind of fascinating. Next, part of the work the man who's developing thought power has to do is to build a temporary channel in etheric matter to bridge the gap. The fact that this comes about through the development of thought power suggests that an active throat center definitely plays a part in this bridging. It's certainly must be developed before this bridging becomes possible. So one hypothesis is that some point during increased activity of the first monastic triangle, the gap between the top of the spinal column and the alta major center is bridged, and the monastic triangle shifts entirely to the head. Certainly, this is causal. You know, this bridging moves you from here to here. And finally, this channel is a reflection in physical matter of the antaskarana. Well, there you go. that the ego has to build in order to bridge the gap between the lower and higher mental, between the causal vehicle on the third subplane of the mental and the monastic permanent atom on the first subplane. This is the work that all advanced thinkers are unconsciously doing now. Anybody notice anything odd about this statement? Here's the usual chart. Yes, Andrew. You unmuted? I saw Andrew's hand.
Sorry, yeah. Sorry, I'm just surprised that he associates the construction of the Antakarana with the ego. I view that as as a work that's done primarily by the soul-infused personality.
Right, that's what we tend to think of. And there's something else that's odd about this statement when we think along those lines that you're suggesting, right? And that is, sorry, I'm gonna find my place here. So here's the usual chart illustrating the Antakarana, courtesy of Tuya Robbins, showing the bridge extending from the mental unit on the fourth subplane of the mental plane up to the monastic permanent atom on the first subplane. You know, as Andrew suggests, this is how we tend to think of the Antakarana. But the leg of the triangle here described in the text, from the causal body to the monastic permanent atom, is built by the ego rather than by the disciple. So without directly saying it, DK here suggests that the Antakarana is ultimately triangular, right? As are the latent radiatory and mental triangles. I didn't write it here, but the giveaway is that in the text here, he says, between the causal vehicle on the third subplane of the mental plane and the monastic permanent atom. Well, this is TCF, early 1925. Later, he in Raising Initiations, he places the causal vehicle on the second subplane, you know. But at any rate, and if you do update it to that, then you have another triangle that built by the soul and in both directions, you know, and then that which is built by the the consciousness of the you could say the consciousness of the imprisoned soul or the seeker / disciple, right? Okay. Let's take a look at the footnote, which is referenced by the word. Yeah.
Robert has his hand up and Marianne has her mic open, so I don't know if both of those people wanted to say something.
Start with Robert.
Yeah, when Andrew used the phrase soul-infused personality, at some point that entity becomes more soul than personality. You know, it says soul-infused. That fusion becomes soul, and the process of the completion of the Antakarana happens, I think it was at the the transfiguration of the personality. So I think that's what that means about the ego has to create. The personality is obviously just a temporary construct that eventually is no longer useful.
Yeah, I think that's right. The full and final process is completed through the building of the Antakarana, at which time the personality, which is represented by the mental unit, which is you could say it's the acme of the demonstration of life on the three lower she's within the three lower she's, that becomes completely soul identified. As a result of that, the personality is foregone as a controlling entity, and then it just becomes a vehicle for soul expression. That's what's meant by the term total soul infused, totally soul infused. That happens at the third initiation, right? Okay, so let's read the footnote here. Reader, please. Oh, was there another question after all or not?
No, Marianne put her mic
Okay.
out. So
Reader, please.
Miri.
Number 1, the master soul is Alaya, the universal soul or Atma. Each man having a ray of it in him and being supposed to be able to identify himself with and to merge himself into it. Second, the Antakarana is the lower manas, the path of communication or communication between the personality and the higher manas or human soul. At death, it is destroyed as a path or medium of communication, and its remains survive in the form of the Kama Rupa, the shell. Voice of the Silence, page 71. The Antakarana is the imaginary path between the personal and the impersonal self, and is the highway of sensation. It is the battlefield for mastery over the personal self. It is the path of aspiration, and where one longing for goodness exists, the Antakarana persists. See Voice of the Silence.
Thank you. Okay, so first up, the master soul is Alaya or Alaya, the universal soul or Atma. Each man having a ray of it in him and being supposed to be able to identify himself with and to merge himself into it. This and all the references in this footnote are from HPB's Voice of the Silence, which, being first generation theosophy, uses a different set of terms to describe the constitution of man than DK does. For example, the monad or true self is called Atma. Let's take a look at the Theosophical Glossary's entrance on Alaya, which is the term she uses for the master soul. Could we get a reader, please?
Yeah, Nisa.
Alaya, Sanskrit. Non-dissolution, the indissoluble, used in Buddhism for the universal soul or higher portions of Anima Mundi, the source of all beings and things. Mystically identical with Akasha in the latter's highest elements, and with Mahabudhi, also with Mula Prakriti as root producer or root nature. With Mahayana Buddhists, Alaya is both the universal soul and the spiritual self of an advanced sage. Arya Sangha taught that he who is strong in the yoga can introduce at will his alaya by means of meditation into the true nature of existence.
Thank you. So if you're interested in this, we covered the relationship between terms at length in a Secret Doctrine series a couple of sessions back, and most of the session was taken up with relating the terms used by first generation theosophy and relating those with the DK version of the terms. You can't get a perfect relationship because they use their whole language inclusive right? But you can make, in some cases, you can get a very good idea. In other cases, there's a little bit of guesswork involved. But anyway, we get a general sense of this highest state of indissoluble, or the ultimate soul, right? Okay, number 2 here, the Antaskarana is the lower manas, the path of communication or communion between the personality and the higher manas, or human soul. So modern theosophists don't tend to think of the Antaskarana as lower manas per se, but rather as the bridge between lower and higher manas, right? This is very much the task of Mercury, the messenger of the gods, which means the messenger between lower and higher mind. The Theosophical Glossary gives a broader definition of the meaning of this term. Could we get a reader?
Robert.
Antakarana, Sanskrit, interior organ or instrument, defined variously as the seat of thought and feeling, the thinking faculty, the heart, mind, soul, and conscience. In Vedanta philosophy, it is looked upon as a fourfold inner instrument or intermediary between spirit and body, with mind being the go-between or bridge. One could say that there are several Antakaranas in the human septenary constitution, one for every path or bridge between any two monadic centers. Man is a unity in diversity, and the Antakaranas are the links of vibrating consciousness substance uniting these various centers. Blavatsky describes it as the path that lies between thy spirit and thyself, the highway of sensations, the rude arousers of ahamkara, the sense of egoity. And then when the two have merged into the one, and the personal sacrifice to self-impersonal, then the Antakarana vanishes because no longer useful as a functioning bridge between the two. Further, the Antakarana is the lower manas. Kind of, these pictures are blocking. Okay, got it. The lower manas, the path of communication or communion between the personality and the higher manas or human soul. Antakarana also has a general sense of an intermediary between something or someone that is low to one that is high. Every messenger of truth and light is an Antakarana between the masters of wisdom and mankind. Likewise, every great and good man or woman is an Antakarana between humanity and the spiritual essence of his or her own inner God. Person living in the noblest and loftiest part of his being becomes such a bridge between the spiritual realm he is in touch with and all other entities and things contacted by him which belong to human life.
Thanks, Robert. So you can see that from the broader perspective, all service acts as an antakarana, because it links, service is the spontaneous effect of soul contact, right? So it links soul energy to those which you serve. And that is, in this broader context that he describes here, that is also antakarana. Then we have the very specific DK description of antakarana, which very specifically connects the mental unit with the mental permanent atom. And that's described at length over about 130 pages in Raised Initiations. And then we have this first generation theosophy, HPB theosophy, where there's much focus on the idea of antakarana as a function of manas that links higher to lower minds. So you have ahamkara, which is the lower ego, the lesser self, through manas reaching buddhi, which would be the triad, right? So this is chitta, is mind stuff, so then through the mind stuff, buddhi is able to contact the lower self. I like this symbol for antakarana. Okay. Next, at death, it is destroyed as a path or medium of communication, and its remains survive in a form as the kama rupa, the shell. Kama rupa is the desire body. Though roughly similar, this is not the antakarana of the modern theosophist. For example, the glossary at the end of DK's first book, Initiation, Human and Solar, describes the antakarana as the path or bridge between higher and lower mind, serving as a medium of communication between the two. It is built by the aspirant himself in mental matter. So one wonders if that's the case, if its remains survive in the form of a kama rupa, which is a desire body. Doesn't seem like the two are talking about the same thing. Yes, I saw a hand.
Yeah, that other definition of antakarana is also exoteric Hinduism, which is why it sometimes got confused in the earlier theosophy.
There you go.
And in terms of it being destroyed at death, obviously, if you have this bridge and one of the sides of the bridge crumbles, then the bridge goes down. So
well, yeah, that's a good point. Of course, it has to. There is, the mental unit goes into abstraction, and therefore the bridge is no more. Yeah. Okay, and next, finally, we're the end of these footnotes. The antaskarana is the imaginary path between the personal and the impersonal self, and is the highway of sensation. It is the battlefield for mastery over the personal self. I mean, you can see how close this, it's a slightly different perspective, but it's not out in left field. It is definitely strongly related to the DK thought. It is the path of aspiration, and where one longing for goodness exists, and where one longing for goodness exists, the antaskarana persists. As a general concept, the antakarana may be described as the quote-unquote path of aspiration and a longing for goodness, but it is also a specific occult technique for bridging lower and higher mind, which DK describes in Ray's initiations. Here's a sample statement. Can we get a reader, please?
Yeah, let's see. Andrew, you want to read again?
Sure. There's no initiation for the disciple until he has begun consciously to build the antakarana, thus bringing the spiritual triad and the mind as the highest aspect in the three worlds into a close relationship. Later, he brings his physical brain into a position of a recording agent upon the physical plane, thus again demonstrating a clear alignment and a direct channel from the spiritual triad straight through to the brain via the antakarana, which has linked the higher mind and the lower.
Thank you, Andrew. This very clear, succinct statement about its purpose. And we have this illustration here. You can see how this could easily be extended into a triangle. Okay, back to the text. Back to the DK part of the text, out of the footnote. Could we get a reader, please?
When the gap is completely bridged, man's body becomes coordinated with the mental body, and the fires of mind and of matter are blended. It completes the perfecting of the personality life, and as earlier said, this perfecting brings a man to the portal of initiation. initiation being the seal set upon accomplished work. It marks the end of one lesser cycle of development and the beginning of the transference of the whole work to a still higher spiral.
Thank you. So first, when the gap is completely bridged, we're talking about that gap between the top of the spine to the alta major center as well. Just keep that in mind as we're talking about, the mental unit to the monastic permanent atom. So when the gap is completely bridged, man's body becomes coordinated with the mental body, and the fires of mind and of matter are blended. So all these three are connected as an event. Here, DK notes a point of correlation between the raising of the Kundalini and the building of the Antaskarana. These two events, which are really one, together cool down the fire of spirit from the causal body. There's so many ways to developing the theme of this form of ascension. He does it again in terms of the unfoldment of the petals of the egoic lotus, like way on it in the pages 800s, where he describes this unfolding in terms of the wisdom, love, and sacrifice petals as shown here. Okay, next, it completes the perfecting of the personality life. And as earlier said, this perfecting brings a man to the portal of initiation, initiation being the seal set upon accomplished work. Well, to my ears, the way DK words this, we might be led to think that he's talking about the first initiation, but this is almost certainly not the case, since a disciple initiate has certainly not perfected his or her personality life, by the time of the first initiation. In fact, DK is probably referencing the third initiation here. Could we get a reader, please?
Janet.
When Kundalini has blended with the pranic fire, the centers become three-dimensional. When it blends with mind or solar fire and the two fires are perfectly united, the centers become four-dimensional. When it blends with electric fire or pure spirit, after the third initiation, they take on two more dimensions.
So here's yet another language for describing, the ascension. Thank you.
Yes.
I saw hands.
Yeah, Lisa.
I just wanted to reference Dwayne Carpenter's work
Uh-huh.
on Lightweaver?
Yeah.
And I had really an interesting experience where he referenced the different energies and symbols becoming mobile and invited you to step into the middle of all of that. And it's really dynamic. It's beyond my verbalization to even say how it affected me, but just that, I think.
Yeah, the great thing about Dwayne's work is he really wants you to have the experience, have an elevating experience as you're viewing his work, and so many of them are in motion. I've like his revolving torus is a fascinating thing. Many years ago, he brought a series of electric fans that he had. Well, that's what they started as, but after he modified them, he was able to calibrate the speed of the fan, and he colored each of the vanes of the fan, and they were multiple vanes, not just 3 or 4 like you think, so that at speed they created this extraordinary visual experience. That's the only way I could describe it. That, you know, if you really allowed yourself to move into it, really, you know, something happened there. It affected your consciousness. This has always been, you know, one of the purposes of Dwayne's work, to actually interrelate with you on a conscious level. Thanks for that reference.
Yeah, well, I had something happen for sure.
Yeah, I don't doubt it at all. Okay, finally, it marks the end of one lesser cycle of development and the beginning of the transference of the whole work to a still higher spiral. DK gives us the technical reason for this transference later in TCF, quote, after the third initiation, a corresponding stimulation takes place in the permanent atoms of the triad, leading to the coordination of the Buddhic vehicle and the transference of the lower polarization into the higher. So from that, we can get some idea as to what he means by marking the end of a lesser cycle and the beginning of the transference of the whole work to a still higher spiral. So I think since this starts a whole new paragraph, I think we'll stop here for today. Any final thoughts, comments? It's a fascinating subject. You know, this tiny little division, I think it's something like 6 pages, is dealing just with the physical aspect and the physical fires and physical energies. He continues this exploration of Kundalini in the next division, which is just around the corner, but he does it from the perspective of the higher fires. So we'll be getting into that soon, if not next time. Okay, let's see.
Robert.
Yeah, Robert.
I keep thinking about the Voice of the Silence excerpt that you put in, where at death, the antaskara becomes a kama rupa shell, you know, which is kind of amazing, because it sort of implies, unless you think I'm wrong here, that the underlying that, the early stages of building the bridge, it's primarily emotional, unless it actually gets completed.
I wouldn't call it emotional.
But Kamarupa means astral or emotional form.
Astral, but not emotional. You know, because we're talking about substance here, you know, not the E waves of emotion. So it could be, you know, rupa is just form, right, and kama is desire. And, you know, but you can have desire as a function of the law of attraction, just, you know, a form built through aspiration. But, you know, I would delink it from it being specifically emotional.
Okay, but think of it then in terms of being astral. Okay.
Yeah.
That's very powerful statement.
It is. I'm not sure it's accurate though. You know.
Yeah. That was my thought. That I wonder if the terminology is getting mixed up here or whatever. But if there's truth to it, if underneath the building of the bridge is this astral impulse or aspiration, and that's all that's left at death if the bridge is not completed, that's a really powerful idea if it is true.
It is a powerful idea, but you know, we know that the bridge is from the fourth subplane of the mental plane to the first, which means that the only material aspect involved is the are etheric. That's the whole field of the mental etheric, right? And so it would have a form, but it just doesn't seem to me that those highest ethers of the mental, where the causal body exists, could be called kama rupic. That's my take on it.
But anyway, but the only underlying point would be, if the bridge was not actually completed in the mental substance, then all you're left with was an aspiration or desire that didn't get
Mhm.
fully completed. And that might be what it means, anyway. That's
Might
all I
be.
can say.
Yeah, it could be.
Okay,